This is For the Governed, a podcast series brought to you by Athalonz. Here are your hosts, Tim Markison and Ron Cates.
Welcome to the Athalonz podcast. As you probably know, our podcast series follows our blog series. This one is focused on the blog entry, "I'd rather be crazy than this be real." Now, a warning to our viewers, this is a pretty serious discussion. It is about child abuse. So just so you know up front, with me as always is Tim Markison, the founder and CEO of Athalonz.
Hey, Ron.
Hello, Tim. I know this is very difficult, but I also know it's incredibly important. Why don't I let you just start in on how this how you became aware?
Yeah. So this topic is about me and my experiences, and the title "I'd rather be crazy than this be real" is how I felt very often in my adult life as I learned more and more about the abuse that happened to me when I was a child. For the most part, my childhood is a void in memory. I have a few memories like preschool kind of age, and then I don't have congruent memories until I'm in high school. So there's like multiple years of grade school that I have zero memories of.
Well, in 1990 or so, you're in law school, right? And you're married.
Yes. Yep.
And this comes to not immediately, you're really not sure what's going on, but some things start to happen with you.
Yeah. So, my wife and I, we'd been married 10 years by 1990. We had two great daughters. We had our own home. We had a nice car. I had a good job working at Motorola as a patent agent. I was going to law school. I felt like I was, living, quote unquote, the American dream. And yet I was miserable inside. I had a lot of self-loathing, very little self-respect, no self-respect, and really unhappy. A lot of anxiety. I'd have panic attacks.
I was going to ask, how did that manifest itself? Like, besides just thinking about it, what actionable things occurred because of that? Were you irritable? Were you grumpy? Or just sad?
It was depressed, and then I would eat. So I developed an eating disorder. I don't know when, but it really became extremely apparent when I was, in my late 20s, early 30s, and in the early 1990s. I would stuff my emotions with food, and then would feel sick about doing that, hate myself for eating that way, and then, essentially became an exercise bulimic. So I would work off all those calories by exercising. I hate to throw up, so I wasn't the conventional bulimic. I was an exercise bulimic. But it was just this vicious cycle. I'd get depressed, I'd overeat, that would make me hate myself even more, and then I'd go work out, and it was a vicious cycle.
So ultimately you sought help. What brought that about?
Yeah, so my wife grew up in an alcoholic family, and she had started seeing counseling to deal with her issues as a child and growing up in that type of environment. And she was feeling better, and she recommended that I go to counseling. And my first thought was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to counseling, because you only go to counseling if you're mentally ill, and I didn't feel I was mentally ill. But I decided to go because I was really at my wit's end, because I was just so depressed and so self-loathing.
So I imagine, because I've gone to counseling, I imagine one of the first questions they ask you, or one of the very first questions is, tell me about your childhood, tell me about what it was like in grade school. And your response was?
I don't remember. So my counselor, his name was Rick, and, in our earliest sessions, he asked me just those questions, and he goes, well, tell me about first grade. And I said, I don't remember. Then we went to second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I had a few memories of sixth grade, a few of seventh. And then he asked me, well, don't you think that's kind of weird that you can't remember any of your childhood? I says, well, not to me. That's just
right.
me.
To you, that's That seemed perfectly normal because
Yeah.
that's how you were.
Yeah, and he told me that, most people congruently remember their childhood from first grade on. It's like, I had no idea. And, excuse me. And then he asked, well, did anything happen to you? I was like, not that I know of. So that kind of started me thinking and starting the memories kind of percolating to the surface from the deep corners of my mind or wherever, traumatic events seem to go in our minds.
Now, I want to point out for the audience that doesn't know, but in high school, you were a star baseball player.
Yes.
So you probably got all kinds of positive attention from a young age because of your baseball skill.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was that. And we've talked about this in other ones, but baseball, saved my life really, because I had nothing to live for but baseball, and thank God I was blessed with a good amount of talent so that I could be, the best player for my age and the next group up. So I did get accolades that way, and it gave me a dream. It gave me hope that no matter what was going on, it just gave me hope so that, when I grew up, I knew I was going to be a baseball player and I would have this good life.
When you first started having memories,
Yeah.
and the ones you could remember, what were those like?
Yeah. So my self-image when I started counseling was I was a worthless piece of shit that couldn't do anything right, because that's what I heard from my father in various ways, countless times a day for my entire childhood. When if he were working on the car, I'd have to assist because I was the oldest boy in the family. And this is Northern Illinois. And, out in December, it's 10 degrees outside and spending hours out there. And my job was to hold the flashlight. And of course, if it moved, I'd get a wrench thrown at me, hold the light in the right spot, God damn it. And that was everything we did. It was, everything I did with him had that kind of tone towards me. So I was a worthless, stupid piece of shit that couldn't do anything right. So, but for baseball.
So you started going to counseling, and then what happened next? How'd that help, and what did it bring about?
Yeah. So we started to address the self-image and, kind of digging into some of the exchanges between me and my father. And then Rick was working with techniques to how to what we called messages. So, something would go wrong and the tape would go off in my head. See, you are a worthless, stupid piece of shit who can't do anything right because look at this. So how to tone those tapes down and how to start putting in different types of tapes. So one of the techniques we worked on, so if this wasn't you making that mistake, if this was, say, your daughter or a friend of yours or somebody that you worked with, how would you address that issue with them? Because I wouldn't call them a worthless...
It would be night and day different.
Yeah. But when it's me, it's, I come
Well, how
down
do you
with
reconcile that?
So it takes practice and years and years and years. And
I got to interject because at this point, you're an incredibly successful young man. You're in law school. You've got a good job.
from objective standards, yes.
Yes.
But from a subjective standard, I was still...
A total failure.
Yeah.
Which we would all aspire to be that sort of failure, but I do understand.
Yeah. So it was quite challenging, but starting to see the hope of replacing those messages. And, they were so loud and so overwhelming that trying to bring in a positive message got drowned out at first. But then it started to click in where I wouldn't be as berating to myself as I would be in the past. So I started to see some change. And then that brought some relief. And then I think as the relief came, then my subconscious kind of opened up a bit.
Well, I say you've opened a can of worms. You've brought some memories to the surface. That means bad ones as well as good ones.
Yeah. Most of them were bad.
Yeah. Did these come to you in dreams or?
So
just sitting around, you're thinking about
Yeah.
something?
So it was a variety of things. Sometimes it could be watching a TV show and a word or a phrase could kind of trigger it. And then I'd go into, what they term flashbacks. So it's, for me, it's a very bizarre type of state. It's, my body's here in the present, but my mind, my feelings, my emotions are somewhere in the past. So I can feel I'm present today with it, but I'm living in a different time in these flashbacks. And most of them were like I was watching it happen to somebody else. So the first dreams, flashbacks that I had were related to physical violence towards me. Sorry, this is emotional to talk about. And
I can only imagine. I mean, I and the audience, thank you for having the courage to even bring this up. I know that ultimately your goal is to end child abuse, to make people really aware of it. That's why you decided to talk about it.
Right.
So we all applaud that, but I can't even imagine how difficult it is. So you start having these flashbacks or memories or dreams. They're triggered by different stimuli.
Yeah.
And they're nightmarish, even if they're not in a dream state.
Yeah. So it was the physical feelings of being choked. And so those were kind of the first round of flashbacks I was having, and they were pretty traumatic. And it was taking me down a path where I was getting more depressed. So when I started working with Rick, my counselor, we were doing once a week. And, we did that for probably 4 or 5 months. And then these flashbacks started to happen. And then we went to, a couple times a week and then 3 times a week. And then there was a time in, I think February of 91 or something like that. I forget the exact time frame, but woke up at 2 a.m. In terror.
So you have all these suppressed memories, suppressed for a reason, to protect you. That's why we suppress memories like that.
Yep.
And now through therapy, in a good way, you're starting to open these back up.
Right.
And I assume that's overwhelming.
Yes.
I mean, this is pretty traditional PTSD, yes?
Yes, it's classic PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I understand it much, much better now than I did, almost 30 years ago when I started dealing with this. But this particular flashback I woke up from, it was 2 a.m. It was being choked to the point where I couldn't breathe. I had a heavy weight on my body where I was paralyzed, and I had a being right here in my face. And it was, the name I'll never forget was Policeman Alice. Still to the day, I don't know what that actually meant. But it was a voice, Policeman Alice, in a very low, gruff voice saying, "If you say anything, we will kill you."
And a lot of this was filmed.
I get
as far as you can remember.
Yeah, I get the sense that, what was happening to me when it came to the sexual abuse part, that sometimes it was just an individual perpetrator, but sometimes it felt like it was done in front of an audience. So part of a child pornographic ring, and I don't have, any any data to substantiate that. As an attorney, I have zero evidence. It's my word from the perspective of a child. And then what I do remember quite a bit, or the feelings that I get, is that I was either drugged or given alcohol a lot of the times that this was going on, so that the feelings were foggy and much more malleable as a toy for whatever games they were playing.
This is just absolutely horrific. I know you're not the only one who's experienced this, and my heart goes out to everyone out there who has. You're having these enhanced flashbacks. It's starting to get really heavy now. So what do you do next?
Yeah. So
you're obviously PTSD.
Yeah.
You're the victim here. Yeah. What do you do to take control of this?
So with respect to the Policeman Alice dream. I literally could not close my eyes for the next 4 weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, right here, right in my face. So I was in law school at this time. I was working full time, and we had two daughters that were 4 and 6. So I started seeing Rick every day during this period, and it still wasn't enough. So Rick suggested that I do inpatient therapy for PTSD. And so reluctantly, I agreed and went to a treatment center for the better part of, or a little bit over 4 weeks to deal with this on a daily basis.
So that's sort of an intensive therapy.
Yeah.
24 hours, 24/7.
Yeah. So it's a lot of group therapy, individual therapy, and just it really opened up the first round of floodgates for me with memories. So then in addition to the physical attacks, then the sexual abuse started to surface, the memories started to surface, and then the weird feelings of like being on display while it's happening. All of that started to surface.
Did they want to give you medication to help you during this time?
Yeah, but I refused, because anything that makes me feel a little bit out of control, like the first time I drank any alcohol that I remember, so I was a teenager and just got that slight buzz feeling. It freaked me out. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Something's really bad's gonna happen to me. So that's why I don't drink, and that's why I don't like taking any medication that alters my cognitive state.
So after you leave the center, how would you describe your status? I mean, obviously you're not healed. Yeah. You're more aware than ever about what's happened, what's going on, and maybe some modalities to deal with it. So what's your next step?
So I got to the point with the treatment center where a lot of the emotion that was held inside me from all that trauma was coming out. So I was starting to be able to sleep at night. And so when I got to that point is when I was released. Well, I left the treatment center, went home. I was still, really depressed and struggling with the issues, but at least I had more tools on how to deal with it, and affirmation that no, this was real. So that feeling of, my God, I'm just insane, and many times through this whole process, I felt I'd rather be crazy than all this be real, because if I'm crazy, there's a physical reason for it. There's something physically wrong in my brain. But to be a victim of child abuse and the emotional scarring that it causes, excuse me, it's so damaging and so hard to come to grips with, and as a parent, it's unfathomable to me to want to do anything to harm my child, and yet the people that were supposed to protect me are the ones I had to be the most afraid of. I mean, that's really, really tough to deal with, and that's what I started to deal with when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, and where the treatment center started to help with that.